We're pleased to be here. You know, it's interesting. I was talking, actually was just down the way, not too far from here, announcing some broadband access grants. And it's interesting, even though you said, what does it have to do with farming? Well, I'll tell you a story. So my mother was born and raised on a farm that didn't have indoor plumbing until she went into high school. My kids never believed that until she started looking at pictures, showing pictures of the old outhouse and that. But I think about my great-grandparents who were farmers and how electricity for their generation changed the way we farm, not just here in Wisconsin, but all across America. So that's a couple generations back, but I think about how that changed things, and I often mention that when I talk about broadband in rural areas, whether it's for education, whether it's for business, whether it's for farming, heck, whether it's even for entertainment or anything else. I said that's kind of like, broadband is kind of like electricity was for farmers many generations ago. It raised productivity, and when I go and make trade missions around the world, we talk about how much more productive our farmers are here in Wisconsin. And that's because of events like this highlight it, because we've taken not just electricity many years ago, but then all the technologies, all the innovations. We have a much higher production per farmer than anywhere else in the world, and so we're proud of that in Wisconsin. It's about just over an $88 billion impact in the state's economy, employing over 400,000 people across the state. But for everyone who farms knows it's more than just a business, right? It's a way of life. And so what we're trying to do in the state is make it easier for our farmers and our farm families to have successful farming. And I like to say, you know, we're obviously known as America's Dairyland, so we're proud of our dairy industry. That's about half of it alone. It's over $43 billion. But it's not just in dairy, we're the #1 producer of cheese. In fact, if we were a country, we'd be the 4th largest country in the world when it comes to cheese production. More than a quarter of all the cheese in America, nearly half of all the specialty cheese. But it's not just in the dairy and the cheese area overall. We're tops when it comes to cranberries. I had a little bit of fun, appropriately being here in this county. I was over in a bog taking a picture with a bunch of folks. I actually know the differences. The water in there is not how they grow, that's how they're harvested. But it's interesting to see. If you haven't seen it just down the way, there's actually 2 bogs, one that shows how it's grown, one that shows us how it's harvested. But it's great thinking about cranberries or cherries or apples, thinking about corn and soybeans, thinking about potatoes and vegetables, in all those different areas, and beef and pork. We're not just America's Dairyland, we're America's Heartland, and we grow and produce just about everything out there. And so we're pleased to be here today to highlight the innovation, to thank the farmers of Wisconsin, to thank the farm families. We know that these days in particular, whether you're in dairy or any other areas, whether it's the price of milk or the price of other commodities, have been a bit of a challenge. We're trying to make that a little bit better. Sheila Harsdorf, our Secretary of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection, a farmer herself, is here. Sheila, stand up so they can see where you're at. Let's give her a round of applause. But Sheila and our team, particularly with the Farm Center and Ag Trade and Consumer Protection, we've been working hard. We've got a new executive order to open up more markets, because we know one of the best ways to deal with prices is to sell more. And if we can open up more markets around the world, that goes a long way. And so we're going to be aggressive in doing that. For those of you who got young kids that you'd like to see stay in farming or go into farming, we announced earlier this year new scholarships to help at all of our technical colleges and at our University of Wisconsin system campuses that focus on agriculture. We've got a series of other things as well. We've got grants that help with farmers dealing with runoff and other areas. So we've got a whole bunch of things we're doing. And then there's bigger things just in terms of even part of the reason why, not just specific to farmers, but overall why we've kept property taxes down over the last 8 years, why we've all but eliminated the state tax on production when it comes to farming, and why we tried to change the legal climate so that you don't get sued all the time for just doing what you've done in the past, that we make it sensible and reasonable. We figure some of our best advocates for clean air, land, and water are farmers, because you live off the land, you work off the land. We want to make it easier for you to do that without a lot of red tape along the way. And we're doing all that. Plus, we understand that not just for our farmers, but in the farm or in the rural communities that support our farm families, we want to make sure you have strong schools. So this last year, we put more money into schools than ever before in the history of the state. And on top of that, we put the highest amount we've ever put into what's called sparsity aid, which helps smaller rural school districts that have to deal with transportation and infrastructure costs, so that every one of our children in the state every one of our students, no matter whether they go to school in a big city or a small town, should have access to a world-class education for whatever the future might hold. Because to me, I don't know about all of you, but I grew up in a small town in Delavan, down in Walworth County. As parents, Tonette and I have two boys, Matt and Alex. Our two sons are graduated from school. They went to school here in Wisconsin. They both left for a little while to go take jobs somewhere outside of Wisconsin, and they're both back. Now, I say I like them back. I don't want them living in my basement. So I'm glad they're home, but not in home. So I like them in Wisconsin, just not in my basement. But I love the fact that I can go over and see them after church, have dinner, or I can go to a ball game, or I can do any number of other things out there. At least in our household, our American dream isn't owning a business or even having a home, which is all nice. Our American dream is having our children and someday our grandchildren be able to graduate and find a fulfilling, meaningful career that keeps them close to home in the state of Wisconsin. That's our focal point, is to keep our graduates, to keep our young people, to keep our children and someday our grandchildren here in the state of Wisconsin. And I know that's particularly important as I look at, like our host here, so many family farms that have been from one generation to the next. Now I laugh, I saw somebody here before was dressed up as Abraham Lincoln. My first year as governor, there he is, right over there. Wisely took his jacket off. But my first year as governor, you know, down at the Wisconsin State Fair, we do a celebration each year where we honor the century family farms that have been in a century, and then there's a small number each year that have been in 150 years. And I said that first year I was governor, 2011, I reminded them that the farms, the handful that were in for 150 years, their families started their farms when Abe Lincoln was the president of the United States. That shows you how far back these things go. And so you kind of forget that connection out there. But we've got farms in this state that have been around that long or longer. And whether it's a farm that's been around that long or one that's just starting out, we know that it's important to have opportunities for our children to stay and grow and build families of their own here in the state of Wisconsin. And farming and agribusiness is a big part of that. And so the last thing I would just say is we understand, in particular, again, we're trying to help all of our farmers, but the dairy industry with dairy prices, particularly a challenge. Back in the mid-'80s, the state created what was called the Dairy Task Force. It had 31 members. It lasted for about a year and a half or so. They came up with 75 different recommendations. And out of that really reinforced the things that they recommended overwhelmingly were approved. And that made us strong again, and it made us a leader as far as America's dairy land. We face challenges, particularly because of prices, but other challenges along the way. And so we announced last month a new dairy task force we call 2.0. Today, I want to thank the chair of that, Dr. Mark Stevens. He leads he's a director of dairy information analyst. So he's on top of the dairy industry. He's going to chair that. We have 31 members from all over the state of Wisconsin that we're announcing today, from all different backgrounds, from dairy farmers, big and small alike, including all different kinds of dairy farmers, organic and everything else included. We have processors, we have cheesemakers, we have marketers, and we have groups that are affiliated and supportive. We tried to get a bit of every possible stakeholder from every part of the state of Wisconsin. They're going to start meeting next month, and with the hopes being that much like it happened back in the mid-'80s, they can come up with a whole bunch of good recommendations to build off the stuff we've already done to keep our farm families strong. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks for letting me come by. Let's enjoy the day. And a good reminder as we toured around, make your way all over the place. You did a good job of telling me about how, you know, way over in the corner where you got the helicopter, which is pretty cool, the new one for Marshfield Clinic, and you got the drones and that. I think you have yesterday I heard you had a candy drop over there. That's kind of cool. So you might have something like that going on. The horses in one end, you got equipment all over. Don't limit yourself to one spot or just one type of food. There's food everywhere. Make your way around the grounds. A lot of these exhibitors have gone to great lengths to come and bring the stuff that they have. Make it up. It's good. You know, I got a Fitbit on. It's a good chance to go around and get a little exercise and see all the cool things that we have for farmers and farming communities here in the state of Wisconsin. God bless all our farmers.
That was remarks from Governor Scott Walker on the importance of agribusiness here in Wisconsin. Thanks for tuning in.